All right, everybody, we're going to go ahead and kick us off. Friends, distinguished guests, students, well, everybody is here is basically one of my friends and supporters. So thank you all for coming to this Shared Lessons on Japan Sustainable Business Practices event by the U.S.-Japan Council. I'm Ginger Vaughn, I'm your MC, and I am faculty here at Rice University and also a member of the U.S.-Japan Council. So, thank you all for coming. I'm so excited to see everyone. Today we're going to talk about some of these best practices from Japan and then also have a few comments from our experts here, including Katie Menard from Ally Energy, Ryo Okumura from Mitsubishi, Tatsuro Kobayashi from Daikin, and also Rachel Metal from Rice University's Baker Institute. So before we begin, I just want to talk a little bit about the U.S.-Japan Council and how it connects global leaders and to create a stronger U.S.-Japan relationship through people-to-people connections. So if you are a U.S.-Japan Council member, can you raise your hand? So I know some of you are supporters. Thank you for coming. And it's an organization whose members believe these people-to-people relationships are really a powerful way to bring leaders together to kind of create solutions around these problems of mutual concern. So in terms of sponsorship, this event would like to give, U.S.-Japan Council would like to give a special thanks to our Climate and Sustainability Initiative founding strategic partner, Amazon, who's helped found the 2022-2023 Sustainability Initiative for the U.S.-Japan Council. And also some of our other sponsors for platinum level, including Amazon, American Airlines, Artani Foundation, CBP Foundation, Deloitte, Fabit, and MUFG, as well as our title sponsors, Daikin, Hitachi, Itoen, NEC, NETT Group, Oryx, Shell, Terasaki Nibei Foundation, Toshizo Watanabe Foundation, and the Toyota Research Institute, as well as some other sponsors and supporters from this slide. So we're really grateful for the folks that helped make this happen and have partnered with the USJC, including all our gold level sponsors and supporters that are also not shown here. So without further ado, I would like to open up this conversation about Japan's sustainability's best practices. One of our speakers, Katie Menhart, is the founder of Ally Energy, also the CEO, and it is a community accelerator that looks at jobs, developing the right talent going forward to have an equitable energy transition. Ally Energy is an inaugural member of Greentown Labs Houston. So you guys know Greentown Labs is just launched here, about a year ago? And so 2 years ago. Sorry, the pandemic was here. I think everybody has stopped time during that period. But it's a climate tech incubator, right? So Katie's going to tell us a little bit of her thoughts around that. She's also held global leadership roles with BP and Shell in safety and environment during periods of financial crises, spills, divestment, and globalization. So she's worked at Duke Energy, Entergy, Enron, and now she's looking at, okay, well, what's the future of sustainable energy and what does the workforce need right here in Houston and beyond? So without further ado, can I get a round of applause for Katie Menard?
So it's great to be here, and it's really strange standing behind a podium because I don't normally stand behind a podium, but Katie Maynard, founder and CEO of Ally Energy, and I want to thank someone here today. I'm looking at her. She's very well known in the community, Donna Cole, big proponent of Japan-American relations, and she also happened to used to bring me into her wonderful abode at her office. I'm an entrepreneur, and if you're an entrepreneur, if you've ever been an entrepreneur, it's really hard to be an entrepreneur. It's hard to start your own business, and instead of being on the second floor of my house, I moved out, and I was with Donna for a short while until I got out on my own. So I thank you, Donna, for everything you do to bring relations between these two great nations and all the great stuff that you do for our community. And of course, thinking of me. So look, I got the call last week, and she said, come talk about why sustainability is important. Why is corporate sustainability important when it comes to climate change for companies? And so I guess this is going to be really easy talk for me, because the first thing I'm going to say is it's the right thing to do. People are shaking their heads. So, and the reason it's the right thing to do is it's not just because it's the right thing to do socially or financially, but it's because that's what builds communities for the long term. And unfortunately, we live in a world today where we're not so long term. You know, I think, how many characters is it, a tweet? It's like 180 now, or maybe it's 200. I think maybe Mr. Musk has extended, he's expanded, he's made his own rules, right? But the point is we're not thinking far enough ahead into the future. And the reason why I think it's important for companies to embrace sustainability is because of the future of the workforce. So I'm going to walk through a few of these. We don't have to go through them all, but I thought these were very insightful. So the first is Gen Z will be 30% of the US workforce in 4 years. So they dream big, and they have a we can change the world attitude. So corporate sustainability is important. It appeals, right, to that next generation. They're the first generation to prioritize purpose over money, although I must argue that I think some of us who went into business for ourselves prioritize purpose over money. But they're called the change generation. So they really care about passion and the desire to make a difference. And they need to see a connection between what they are doing and broader social impact. And that's why sustainability is super important to corporations. We used to call it corporate social responsibility. Now you hear ESG. You hear the for and the against, but at the end of the day, corporate social responsibility is important to building communities and empowering work culture. The third, they have pride in organization. The pride in organization they work for is critical. So they care about the companies they work for. Over half express a desire for service-oriented work. Service-oriented work, that's huge, right? So they read the mission statements. They read the stuff you're putting in the CSR and the ESG reports. So this is really important to that next generation workforce. They're obsessed with authenticity. So there's no Photoshop in this generation. Everything you say or do will be scrutinized, and they will actively publicize ugly corporate culture. So it's super important if you want to maintain a position in the industry as a leader that you embrace and you invest in corporate social responsibility. They have even higher expectations than millennials. Okay, I don't know about you, but that's making me tired, because the millennials have high expectations, don't they? Where are my millennials? All right, there you are. So, they expect workplace flexibility, they expect their opinions to matter, and they do have respect, right, for manager. It's a top priority. They expect open conversations, no borders, right? Meaningful work drives motivation. So 75% believe that work should have a greater meaning than just bringing home the bacon. So meaning and purpose means a lot to this next generation. They value independent work, so skills can shine. So 71% believe in the phrase, if you want it done right, do it yourself. It's so funny listening to this, because I'm like, gosh, this sounds a lot like me. So I'm raising a Gen Z. She's 12. And there are a lot of attributes that I actually can identify with Gen Z. 69% would rather have their own workspace than share it with someone else. So this says a lot about this next generation and its importance around independence. They are concerned about working with boomers and Gen Xers. Where are my Gen Xers? Long live Gen X. All right, where are my boomers? It's okay, you can raise your hands. Okay, so the rest of you are Gen Z. Do we got any Gen Zs in the room? All right. So 92% are concerned about the tech generation gap. They don't feel comfortable about their communication skills, like writing emails and handling voice calls. So I will tell you this is true. When you invest in your workforce, we are going to have to invest in critical communication skills. Believe it or not, the pandemic did what? It robbed us of our communication skills. So I get more calls for, can you come in and help our young people learn how to communicate? I always thought, well, of course they know how to communicate. They've got all those toys and those devices, right? But they want daily interaction with their bosses, and they think they did something wrong if they don't get it. So this generation is very different. It's very socially centric. They're also the most entrepreneurial generation, so 72% say that they want to start a business. I think that's important for corporations, and corporations need to think about how entrepreneurship can drive social innovation inside companies. They prize and embrace diversity. If this doesn't say sustainability, I don't know what else does. 60% will support brands that stand on issues they believe in regarding human rights, race, and sexual orientation. So after the war broke out a year ago, I had more than, on one hand, CHROs call me and say that they were shocked at the number of people who left their organization because of the position of how the company handled the war and the response to the war. People leaving jobs, right, because of the war. Not something you would think, right, would be a mental model, but that's what's happening. People are about what companies care about. They want to work for companies that share similar values. Equality and environment are top causes. 72% believe racial equality is the most important issue of today. This is the generation that's going to make big headway for racial equity. Mental health and obesity are critical health issues. This is something that I think is important when we look at corporate social responsibility, the wellness, the wholeness of our people and the wholeness of our societies. Higher rates of ADHD and accustomed to accommodation in schools, and 47% expect to be obese. So this is a challenge that they are concerned about. They want to solve a problem versus serve a need. That's a big deal, right? So they want to tie service to their careers. That's a very big shift. You have 8 seconds to get attention from these folks. You have to think in 4D. You've got to use 5 screens at once. So I have 3 at home. I don't know that I can handle more than 3. Use pictures and keep it short, and tell authentic and compelling stories. And last, video rules. Nearly all use YouTube, and 50% say they can't live without it. I don't know about you, but I go home and my daughter, she doesn't watch anything other than YouTube. YouTube. She wants her own YouTube channel, right? That's how they discover, learn, socialize, and connect. You want to make it clear that there's an overall goal in your company, and that your company is not, that is looking beyond profit. So, you know, when Ginger said, come talk about this topic, I said, it's going to be really easy. There's 2 answers here. The first is, it's the right thing to do. But the next answer is, you got to be anticipating what this next generation workforce is telling us. And this is going to be happening not just here in America. It's going to be happening in Japan. It's going to be happening in Europe. It's going to be happening around the world. Because this generation is connected. One of the profound activists in this generation is Greta Thunberg. And how did Greta Thunberg get her voice? She used her voice, and she was an activist for the environment because she was able to galvanize groups of kids her age, right? So this is that next generation. Embrace them. I'm so proud to be raising one. It's kind of fun to watch her. I was just telling everybody that I got a text message today that she's going to teach me how to make my TikTok private, because apparently I'm embarrassing her with her with her friends. I'm like, excuse me, but I'm cool on Instagram. Yeah, but Mom, Instagram is for old people. Okay. So there'll be another channel, I'm sure, after TikTok. There'll be more channels that come out as we sojourn through this bit. Lastly, a lot of people ask what Ally is. So we're helping folks to rise to a set of challenges that are bigger than all of us. So we know society is demanding more from business is demanding more from the workforce, and accountability is increasing, and it's everyone's job. So our purpose our higher purpose is to help cultivate purpose-driven leaders that are better connected, better informed, and better equipped to navigate an equitable and diverse and inclusive journey to net zero. And at this time, I'll close it. Hopefully that wasn't too fast.
Thank you, Katie, for that insightful presentation. And I'm laughing because you have a teenager in the house, and I have a 4-year-old, so now I think I'm really in trouble. You know, I teach MBA students primarily, but then when I go home, I lose negotiations with my little one here. So I really appreciate that insight in connecting what we need to be thinking about and how we need to, set our expectations around creating these initiatives, because you're right, the workforce is expecting it, the next generation is expecting it, and I think the work you do is very important, and you're going to be very busy and get busier in the near future. So the next speaker is Ryo Okumura from Mitsubishi Corporation. So Ryo's been at Mitsubishi for over 2 decades working in the energy and climate industry division, and one of his notable projects that he might mention was he was a lead of global impact for a greenhouse gas emission reduction project in southern Iraq about 10 years ago. And in the U.S., he's been leading corporate venturing and new business development in the emergent climate tech space. So welcome, Ryo.
Thank you, Ninja. Hey, my name is Ryo. I'm working in Mitsubishi Corporation Houston office. I came to United States almost 5 years ago. First, I came to Silicon Valley to lead corporate venturing, which is a startup investing activity, specifically for emerging climate tech space. But actually, before I introduce what I'm doing right now in Houston, let me share my climate journey. You know climate journey, yeah? So actually, to talk about something like climate, it's better to why you are keen to work for sustainability or climate thing. It's very important. So, yes, thank you, Ginger. Yes, I'm working in energy industry. So, Paul, people working in energy industry. Okay, almost half. So I have energy career, and first I joined a shipping company to transport liquefied natural gas from Australia to Japan, Northwest Shelf shipping, and which is very conventional, traditional natural gas project. Japan needs natural gas, of course, and actually I'm so proud. I'm so proud to work for natural gas industry. Still, I'm working in natural gas industry. I'm very proud to be presenting about natural gas. Next, I moved to Middle East. This is kind of a game-changing project for me. As Ginger introduced, Basra Gas Company. I am so sure most of you never visited Iraq. So, but I was working in Iraq just after the war, and it was very, very, very inspiring projects. So, energy. I will talk about energy trilemma later. But actually, this Basra Gas Company project is really for to serve for trilemma. Of course, energy security and energy equity or affordability and sustainability. This Basra Gas project is stopping flaring gas in Basra, southern Iraq. They are just burning gas for nothing. So we are collecting natural gas, to utilizing natural gas for energy for the people on the ground. And of course, to stopping flaring gas is good for environment, good for climate, and of course, actually, equity. Actually, people in Iraq is importing energy. They were importing energy. That's That's kind of surprise. So the country of oil and gas was importing energy. So we were supplying domestic natural gas to the people on the ground because this is kind of equity or equitable projects. So after that, I was working for liquefied natural gas project, and I was so proud. But at that time, my son, he asked me because he was having English school in Japan after he came back to Japan, and his teacher, by the way, his teacher from California, asked my son, "Hey, Kyo, your daddy, me, is energy professional. So actually, let's think about climate. So please ask your daddy how to mitigate CO2 from natural gas for elementary school children." And of course, my son asked me, "Hey, daddy, you are a professional of natural gas. I'm proud of you. So please tell me how to mitigate carbon dioxide from natural gas." I have no idea, of course. No idea. So maybe, yes, there's carbon capturing, maybe, or some people say you can extract hydrogen from natural gas without emitting CO2. But I knew it's very, 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 very early stage. So actually, I decided to little bit shift my career to climate pathway. And coincidentally, I had the opportunity to go to business school in Europe. And I talked about this climate journey with my fellow classmate. And everybody told me, "Hey, Rio, this is the moment. So this is a turning point for you. So why don't you think about climate innovation?" Then I wrote my proposal to move to Silicon Valley. Then actually I came to Silicon Valley, and I was directing corporate venturing activity in climate tech space in 2018. But think about pre-COVID, 2018, Silicon Valley, everybody was talking about AI, blockchain, IoT type of thing. Climate, hey Rio, climate. So it's a money losing process. So, but still, I met with an organization which is Breakthrough Energy. The people knows Breakthrough Energy. Great, it's the Bill Gates. And I met with the Bill Gates organization, Breakthrough Energy, and they were crazily active in climate tech space as venture capital, climate venture capital. And then I decided to collaborate with this organization because Mitsubishi Corporation is very, very, very traditional and conventional and conservative company, and we need more idea how to maneuver the business in this climate era. So probably the Bill Gates or Breakthrough Energy is one of the best partner for Mitsubishi Corporation, because climate is very new, very nascent, and everybody talking about collaboration. So collaboration is very important. I will touch upon later. And then I moved to Houston, and I'm doing a project development rather than startup engagement, because we need project, we need molecule. Actually, when I was in Silicon Valley, I noticed that there are many emerging technology available, but very emerging. And Houston is the best city for me because energy capital. I have oil and gas career. I have oil and gas background, so Houston is kind of second hometown for me. So it was really good opportunity for me to start business development or project development engagement based in Houston with emerging climate technology. So that's me. So it was wrong. Let me skip Mitsubishi Corporation introduction. Maybe you know Mitsubishi. So I'm working in. I was working in natural gas. Now I'm working in next generation thing. Mitsubishi already committed net zero. I think 3 years ago. So think about energy trilemma. To think about sustainability, you have to you also have to think about another two elements of energy: equity or availability and security. This is United States. So this is from our World Energy Council. It's probably you know they are publishing ranking of performance of energy trilemma. So this is United States. So trilemma rank number 10, AAC. Energy security, of course. So you are in Houston, and you have energy, and energy equity. Yes, the power is available. Natural gas is available anywhere with very affordable price. But sustainability, unfortunately, because energy consumption per capita is very high here in US. One more thing, right-hand side, the country context, and bottom of right, the innovation capability, which is quite high. So this is the power of United States. This is why I came to US, or I came to Silicon Valley and Houston. So the power of innovation. This is a game-changing context for energy. This is Japan. So this highlight the difference of pyramid. Japan, BAA, energy security, B, but I can say C because no energy, natural energy resource available in Japan. And in the context of renewable energy, unfortunately, very limited. And some people say, why don't you build more PV or solar panel? But actually, per capita or per flat area, Japan is the number one PV country in the world. And also nuclear. As you are aware, we have 54 nuclear reactors, but only 9 reactors are available right now. 9 out of 54. But still, Japanese power plant is running to supply power. So they are using natural gas mostly. And also due to a disaster in Fukushima, actually to have another nuclear power plant is very challenging. And current administration is also very keen to have more nuclear power, but still not really popular policy among people in Japan, very unfortunately. So, hey, we need a game-changing something, but right and bottom, innovation capability, it's low. Some people say Japan is a very innovative country, but to be very frank, actually, the power of Japanese innovation is very much damaged. unfortunately, in last 30 years. So yeah, we need to think about innovation more seriously, and or maybe let's export power of innovation to Japan for Japanese people. The climate innovation, and this is a very one-page introduction of Breakthrough Energy Catalyst program, which we participated. And what is innovation? This is very, very, very important. And innovation is technology, and innovation is a combination, as you know. And innovation is, I think, do something. And there are many technology available, but actually not so many technologies are deployed yet. And just in laboratory or just in university and the program of purpose of Catalyst program is deploy technology. But actually deployment is very, very capital intensive process. You can test in laboratory, but you cannot test in your power plant or in your community or in your municipality. So let's collaborate with the people or in the partnership. And the Breakthrough Energy is having Mitsubishi and other many the blue chip companies. And we are very keen to collaborate each other to deploy emerging climate technologies such as hydrogen or sustainable aviation fuel, or long duration energy storage, or direct air capture type of something like exotic technologies. And I say collaboration is very important. Actually, what is collaboration in climate innovation? So the Schumpeter said innovation is a new combination, and collaboration in deployment of emerging climate technology is something like to help chef in restaurant. So because probably you have many chance to visit restaurant, but you never help your chef because you are the guest of restaurant. But in climate area, you have to collaborate with your chef. So of course, chef has to cater for the request of your guest. This type of collaboration is not really conventional in capitalism. But in climate era, I think we have to think about unconventional collaboration between chef and guest. So we are very, it's kind of surprised. So Bill Gates has the power of, Bill Gates is a great influencer, so he has power to connect chef and guest. So now we are entertaining great conversation with our fellow partners. So this is some example of what Mitsubishi Corporation doing, but this is a little bit how do you say, energy thing. And Japan need energy security, of course, but Japan need sustainable energy. And the idea of decarbonization is renewable or zero carbon natural gas. We call e-methane, and we are envisioning to produce e-methane in United States and to export natural gas. E-methane is natural gas, molecule is natural gas, to Japan. Very simple, but actually first we have to produce hydrogen, and we have to capture CO2 and synthesize methane from hydrogen and capture the CO2. It sounds like very lengthy and costly process, but we are very serious, and we are collaborating with our end user, which is Japanese city gas companies. So our guests are helping chef. So this is an example of next generation collaboration, next generation climate innovation. So that's it. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Ryo Okamura, for that presentation on some of your company's initiatives. I know that we're going to have some questions for you, but we will save that for the Q&A. And now we're going to hear for our next speaker, Tatsuro Kobayashi from Daikin. So he is the Vice President of Strategy and Business Development at Daikin U.S. Corporation. You're based out of New York, right? And he's working on advocacy and outreach activities to industry organizations around refrigerants. And you've had numerous positions, both in Japan and the United States. And now he's been based in Washington, D.C., New York, and also Houston, right, before coming back. So you've been to all the big cities. You've eaten all the good food here. So we look forward to hearing what you can tell us more about Daikin. Please welcome Kobayashi-san.
Thank you, Ginger, for that kind introduction, and thank you to U.S.-Japan Council for allowing this opportunity for me to speak on behalf of our company, Daikin. And so today I'd like to talk about our experiences in fighting climate change and what we have done from 3 points of angles, and not only by ourselves, but with our industry, with other competitors, per se, and the experiences that we have done on a global basis, and hopefully that what we can achieve the same kind of practice here in the U.S. So first, I'd like to introduce about Daikin. How many of you have? How many of you know Daikin? Oh, then I don't have to explain much. Thank you. But we are a Japanese company. We're 99 years, and next year we're celebrating our 100th year anniversary. Globally, we have 90,000 employees and over 300 companies, and 90% our sales globally was around $28 billion, with more than 90% of our business related to HVAC. And we are the number one company in terms of HVAC. And then we also have less than 10% of our business is coming from our chemical division, and we're number 2 in that segment. So today I'd like to talk about our Daikin's 3 core technologies. And the reason why I like to talk about this is that HVAC is, you don't see it much, so you don't realize, but even here you probably don't realize any machines or HVAC units, but the reality is that 35 to 40% of energy consumed in commercial buildings are from HVAC. And then also more than 10% of global greenhouse gases emissions are from HVAC. So we have this, as a global number 1 company, and also just being in this sector, we have this responsibility to tackle climate change. And we have these 3 core technologies, which is heat pump, inverter, and refrigerant. And heat pump is, you may not be familiar with this terminology, but this is heating not through gas but through electricity. So this is electrification and decarbonization. So many of your houses may have gas furnaces, but we're trying to electrify and change that heating system from fossil fuel based to electricity. The second inverter is, we call it inverter, but it's also called as variable speed. And this technology, which I'll go into more detail later on the slides, can save up to close to 60% of energy consumption by having this technology. And then third is refrigerant. And in air conditioning, refrigerant is used as a medium to conduct heat exchange. But this has gone from the ozone depleting days to now global warming, and has a relatively high global warming. So this refrigerant reduction and going to a low global warming potential refrigerants reduces the greenhouse gas emissions. And these are the three core areas that where we have been focusing on and where we continue to strive here in the U.S. So for those who are not familiar with HVAC, it may be hard in the U.S. because especially in your U.S. homes, you have your indoor units in your closets or your attic or basement, and you don't really see them, you don't really know them until it breaks and you have an issue and you have to find someone to come and fix it. But if you've been to Japan or other places, you may have seen systems, and you can see that there's an indoor unit and an outdoor unit, and then there's a compressor in the middle, and there's a refrigerant that goes between the outdoor unit and the indoor unit, which does the heat exchange. So it's transferring heat. So inside in a summer day, it's not providing cool air, but it's actually taking that heat inside the room and taking it outside at what's called a heat exchange. And then this slide specifically shows how the heat pump works. So this is just reverse to cooling mode. So it may be hard to believe, but there's actually heat, even in cold days in outdoor, and it takes that heat from the outdoor, and then through this refrigeration cycle, it provides this heat to the indoor, and you can see that this heat pump is energy efficient because it's using 1 kilowatt of energy. But by taking the outdoor heat, in this example, you're taking 6 kilowatt of heat. So you're only using 1 kilowatt of electricity, but you're providing 7 kilowatt equivalent of heat. So this heat pump is very efficient and is becoming more popular these days. And as I mentioned, how it's becoming popular. So these are some of the articles that was shown on Washington Post last year. And you can see on the left side, heat pumps can counter Putin and the climate crisis, advocate says. And you can see Vice President Harris and Department of Energy Secretary Granholm standing in front of our equipment and listening to us about how heat pumps could battle climate change. And then on the right side, there's also another article from the Washington Post, and I highlighted some saying like, heat pumps are far more efficient than furnaces, reducing electricity use for heating by 50%, according to the Energy Department. So as you can see, heat pump is a way of decarbonization, changing from fossil fuels to electrification, and as I mentioned earlier, the efficiency of it is there. But right now in the U.S., about 50% of residential homes are using a combination of cooling-only air conditioning and gas furnaces, and only 30% are using a heat pump with backup heaters. And this is why we're trying to make this heat pump more and more penetrated in this country, so that we go to this electrification. And then the next one I like to speak about is variable speed or inverter. So traditional air conditionings are on and off. If you realize, like I was staying at my hotel room this morning, and then it's quiet, and then you hear this roar, and you hear this air conditioning system come on. So this is an on and off compressor, and when it turns on, that's when it uses a lot of electricity, and this is very common in the U.S. Right now. Majority of the systems are these on-off non-inverter or non-variable speed compressor type air conditioning. Whereas the inverter system it doesn't go on and off. It's always on, and it adjusts to the set point that you have. So it's kind of like if you're driving a car, if you're constantly stepping on your accelerator and brake and repeating that on and on and on, it's very inefficient. You will use your fuel mileage is very bad. But if you have it on auto cruise, it gives you a very good fuel mileage per gallon. So inverter heat pump is like that. And in the US right now in 28, the figures are a little bit old, but we only have in the 16% of the market is this inverter heat pump. And this again, as I mentioned in the earlier slide, can save about 60% of energy consumption by switching from this traditional on and off compressors to inverter type systems. And then what we have done is, at the bottom of this you could see like we have partnered up with the Chinese largest AC company Gree back in 2009, and we provided this inverter technologies to them, and it increased. And if you could look at the global map on the right, in China, where the inverter rate was 7% in 2009, went up to close to 80% because we partner up with a Chinese company. So it's not only about Daikin and us winning. We are in the market and we have competition, but it's about how we collaborate as an industry to tackle this common issue, which is climate change and that we are facing right now on a global scale. So this is one of the activities that we have done in China, and we are looking forward to having similar kind of experience in the U.S. to increase the adoption of inverters in the U.S. To almost close to 100%. In Japan, for example, 100% of their AC is already inverter systems. Next is refrigerant. So I mentioned in the refrigerant how an air conditioning works. The refrigerant is used for the heat exchange, and if it's not emitted to the atmosphere, it has no environmental effects, but there's small leakage, or at the end of life, these could leak and it goes to the atmosphere, and it has a greenhouse gas emissions. It contributes to global warming. And traditional refrigerants, which is shown on the pink, 410A, is 2,100 times of global warming when you compare CO2 as 1. And then we are now promoting a refrigerant called R32, which is 675. So by itself, that is 1/3 of the refrigerant, a global warming potential of that refrigerant. But this refrigerant R32 is very energy efficient, so you can reduce the charge size per unit. Compared to traditional systems, you could reduce it almost by 30% of the refrigerant charge. So overall, you could reduce the environmental impact by 76%, making it 1/4 of today's refrigerant R410A. And this we are launching right now in the U.S. market. In Japan, already all the residential units are using R32 refrigerants. And to promote the use of R32, Daikin opened 93 patents that we hold in emerging countries in 2011, and then also expanded it from emerging countries to worldwide in 2015. And then furthermore, in July of 2019, we also announced a pledge of non-exercise of patents filed since 2011. So over the course of several years, we've released more than close to 400 to 500 patents. So other companies other than Daikin can use this technologies to use R32. So again, this is another experience where our company our top management has made a decision that we're not going to keep our technologies to ourselves, but we want the industry to aggressively use this technology to, again, battle against climate change. So this is the third point about R30 on the refrigerant and avoiding greenhouse gas emissions. And then with those three, inverter, heat pumps, and refrigerants, we could also make the systems much smaller. So as you can see, and I forgot to mention the first slide about Daikin. I was talking with Dee Dee earlier and saying that she had a Goodman unit, and I have a picture of a Goodman unit here. We do have Goodman, Amana, and Daikin brands. It's all part of the Daikin family right now. But you have a traditional Goodman unit here that we call a cube style. It's quite big. If you have a house, you see it, it's big. And then we're now proposing a new model with a variable speed heat pump called FIT. And you can see the comparison between the two. And you can see like the weight of the system is 50% lighter. The product volume is 1/4 of the volume. It has almost 45% less refrigerant. So in a typical 53-foot truck, traditionally, you can only put 68 units in a truck. Whereas this new FIT systems, you could put 204 units that can be loaded. So in addition to all those technologies that I mentioned earlier, with these technologies, we can make the unit smaller, which means less material, less weight, less CO2 emissions through transportation, and other benefits. Like, for example, a contractor doesn't have to go to the shop every time they have to go to a work site. They could buy 2 units and put it in their truck, for example, and then go to 2 work sites continuously without coming back to our store, for example, because of how small the equipment could be. So these are the things that we're working on and trying to change the U.S. market right now. And finally, now that we're in Texas, my final slide I wanted to mention is we have a factory just outside of Houston on Northwest, just out on 290, just outside of the city limits of Houston in Waller, Texas. It's a 92 acres facility, and it's equivalent to 74 football fields with end zones. It used to be the second largest facility when it was built in 2017 after Boeing. Now with many Tesla gigafactories that are being built, we are now going a little bit behind, but we're still in the top 10 of this in terms of all not only air conditioning but all industries facility. We're in the top 10 facility, and we have production, warehouse, office, and showroom where we invested $500 million to build these units. And here are some of the pictures of our guests that have visited us in the past, like the Secretary of Energy at the time, Rick Perry, who used to be the governor of Texas, and also Ambassador Tomita had recently visited us as well. So with that, I'd like to close, and hopefully I was able to explain some bit of what we're trying to do in terms of fighting climate issues as Daikin and also with the industry together. Thank you very much.
Thank you to Tatsudo Kobayashi. So, us Texans, we can't live without our AC, right? We do everything bigger and we say better. So I think you have your work cut out for you at Daikin, but it really looks like you're progressing in changing the kind of technology we need to be more sustainable. So our next speaker is from Rice's Baker Institute, Rachel Meidel, and she focuses on sustainability, the circular economy, domestic and international policy and laws. It relates to life cycle management of hazardous wastes. And she is currently a fellow in energy and environment, but previously she was appointed as Deputy Associate Administrator for the Pipeline and Hazardous Materials Safety Administration, which is an agency of the U.S. Department of Transportation. So now we will welcome Professor Meidel.
Thanks for the introduction. Thanks for the invite to speak here. Actually, it was last minute. My boss was supposed to speak tonight up until a few hours ago. But we all cover very similar issue areas in what's known as the energy transition. My area of expertise is a little bit more scoped. I focus a lot on sustainability and circular economy, and within the energy transitions, I look a lot at waste management. I have a very, very broad global perspective, which makes my focus pretty extensive because I look at entire life cycles, and that's and so like in the presentations that we had today so far, what I really liked is that sustainability was more broad than typically what is known. When I talk with a lot of people, I advise a lot of companies and teach here on campus, and typically our idea of sustainability is pretty narrow. So it was refreshing to see that it is more broad and some understandings. And so the Baker Institute here on campus, if you're not familiar with that, we are a public policy think tank. We're a nonpartisan nonprofit. We are #1 ranked as an overall institution, and Center for Energy Studies, we've been ranked, I think, #1 4 years running. So now we're considered like a center of excellence. And so our desire and our work is to promote actionable policy changes. So a lot of the work that we do, we interface with policymakers at the state, national, and international levels. We help to drive truly actionable change that can be implemented across geographies. And so my work is broad, like I said, and I also focus my work outside of the Baker Institute. I'm a strategic advisor for Morgan Stanley Capital International, and so we developed a whole suite of circular economy indexes last year. And you know, that is a challenge, which I'll get into here, because you know, there's a lot of discussion on circular economies in the context of sustainability, and those two things are very distinct. But I'll get into that in just a second. And so some of the drivers for sustainability and a sustainable future, which I'm sure you're all familiar with these, but a lot of corporations and governments are driving towards sustainability, and they're doing this through a number of different mechanisms. ESG was mentioned, you know, the Climate Accord, the UN Sustainable Development Goals, all of these things, and you know, along with pressure from shareholders and stakeholders across the board, are driving companies and industries and consumers and governments to think more about sustainability. And so I want to I just want to go back to the basics of what sustainability is, because in a lot of these conversations, I think there's an assumption that we understand what it is. And I've surveyed hundreds and hundreds of people and companies, and oftentimes what comes back is that sustainability is environment focused. It's climate change, it's emissions, and that is only one facet of it. And so this up here is my definition of sustainability. There's many out there, but I think this gets to the heart of it, especially when we talk about energy transitions. It really is a balance between the economics and the least energy and resource intensive pathways and the best environmental performance and social outcomes across life cycles. That is what sustainability is, and it's all three of these facets. And the idea is to transition from a linear economy, and that's where we're at now. That's where our business models have been for decades, where it's all about material extraction and processing, manufacturing, using, and then there's this end of life where we don't have a lot of options for many of the things that we put on the market. And so we want to transition to a circular economy, and this is a framework that's really coming into focus. Especially in the United States more recently. It's been around for many, many years. China is in its 14th or 15th 5-year circular economy plan, where it's actually a national legislation. I think Japan has national legislation on circular economy, and there's a number of other countries that do. It's prevalent in the EU in national legislation and directives, and it is not so much so in the United States. This is something that is brand new for us. A lot of industries are driving forward with this, but it's a framework that looks at waste differently, designs out waste using waste as a resource. It looks at alternative energies, how to integrate those using natural capital, looking at different business models, different process designs, how we can collaborate symbiotically throughout the supply chain to create value. It's looking at regenerative material cycles, and I'm simplifying here what a circular economy is, because it is fairly complex. But I just wanted to touch on some of the more dominant business models, which the most prevalent one in the world is number 2, which is resource recovery and recycling. Keep in mind that when you hear circular economy and talk about it within your own organizations and entities, that recycling is just one tiny cog in the overall circular economy framework and machinery. But there's other things like, how do we redesign things to become more recyclable or easier dismantle, that we can easily dismantle them at the end of life? How can we use alternative materials and substitute them? How can we extend product life cycle pathways through repairing and upgrading, remanufacturing, redistribution? How can we use product as a service? Instead of focusing on ownership of things, how can we do collaborative consumption? So these are some of the circular economy business models, and a lot of that is overlaid, as I mentioned, on the whole conversation of sustainability. And I think a challenge and an obstacle that I see time and time again especially as these conversations come into focus in the U.S., in other parts of the developed world, is that we're equating sustainability and circular economy. We're assuming that if we institute circular practices, that it's an automatic pathway to sustainability. That anything circular, like using renewable resources, integrating solar or green hydrogen, any of these things that we're deeming circular is automatically sustainable. But it's not. There's, as you can see, a small area there in overlap where you have that equilibrium, where you have a circular, sustainable economy. But not all pathways in circularity lead to sustainability, and that's very, very important. It also underscores the importance of capturing metrics and defining what a circular economy is, and measuring that against sustainability, measuring that against your sustainability program and profile to see if a circular economy offsets any of your environmental gains or social gains. And so this is, and this is not all inclusive here. This is just a snapshot of some of the things that I put together on the systems level approach of sustainability, and it's to help people understand that is multifaceted, that is very complex. It is not one-dimensional. You have to think about a lot of different elements in order to get to sustainability. There's going to be trade-offs. If we don't identify and quantify a lot of these elements, we're going to be shifting risks across the supply chain throughout life cycles, and we don't want that. Not understanding this, not capturing these measurements, not being transparent about this. This is what leads to greenwashing, and this is what's happening a lot throughout the energy transition. You can't optimize individual parts without looking at the broader picture and understanding what it means to the entire society, to the entire systems level approach. Environmental justice is another area of focus for my research and portfolio at the Baker Institute, and it's something that is integrated now as a priority for the nation, and it's a difficult topic once we start talking and integrating environmental justice with sustainability, because there's significant trade-offs in just talking with about energy. There's significant trade-offs when we talk about things like solar or wind or electric vehicles, and so we have to understand where those populate and where we're shifting those risks. And so I love the first presentation by Katie that looked at the social aspects and the workforce development, because that is very important, and that is not a conversation that we speak honestly about and that we fully understand. When we look at a circular future, our workforce is going to, the demographics and the technology needs and their capabilities are going to be very different than what we're seeing today. So it's we have to understand that and how we can how that can lead to a more inclusive and diversified workforce. And so I highlight climate change and emissions here. Because in most conversations, I would say just about every conversation I have, it doesn't matter if it's with different governments around the world, or if it's with our regional policymakers or corporations, or even with students here at Rice. When we talk about sustainability, what immediately comes to mind is climate change and emissions. We're very emissions focused, and as you can see. This is just, those are just, two elements of what sustainability is. It's an entire network of things. And so and that brings me to, I want to break down the difference between sustainability and ESG. They're not the same things. I know that they're we talk about them in the same breath and in the same manner, but they're very different. ESG is an investment focused framework. It centers on financial risks and returns, and it's hardwired into the financial markets. And all of these standards that we're talking about today, they're set by lawmakers and investors and reporting organizations. And as I mentioned, if you look at what SEC is doing and others, it's climate and emissions focused, and sustainability is broader than that, right? Where sustainability is principles in managing planetary boundaries, and so. it's a broader set of domains, and so we have to keep in mind that they're two separate things, and we can't concatenate those two topics. There's relationships there, but they're very, very different. If you focus your sustainability reporting and focus on ESG alone as what's reported by, required by law, and what we're focusing on now, you're going to miss the sustainability, the balance of sustainability, and that homeostasis that we're looking for, and you're not going to reach your sustainability goals. And so that's very important that you look at those separately, together but separately. And I know this is a busy slide, but the point here is to drive home what I just said. So the focus on ESG is sustainability, kind of equating those two things. ESG right now is primarily focused on emissions, so scope 1, 2, 3 emissions. I'm sure many of you are familiar with this. And so if we just focus on meeting the terms of ESG as it's defined today, and that term is defined, ESG it's being developed and evolving, and so it will expand through time. But the focus right now is climate and how do we meet the terms of scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions. Well, if we do that, all of these things under the clouds that I have, economy, all of the different metrics and impacts under environment and social and government, we're going to lose sight of that. And so again, when you think about ESG, also think about what it means to the broader sustainability, agenda. And so, if we look at the sustainability transition and energy transitions, and if we have that emissions focus and climate focus, as important as they are in these discussions, it's going to cause and create a whole lot of blind spots. And right now we have a lot of blind spots. We're not looking honestly and transparently and capturing all of the data and the issues associated with gender issues and things like environmental justice and fair trade and waste management and all of these things that I've been focusing on now for 27 years. And let me just back up a minute and share with you, the reason why these issues are so important to me is early on in my career, my first job was a hazardous materials field chemist, like coming out of college. And I had no idea what hazardous materials was and what that meant, and it required me to go out into the field. I was working for an environmental services company and was a contractor for the military and the government, and so they sent me to work all around the world managing hazardous waste and different types of waste for military, government, and that expanded to commercial entities and others. And so worked at different ports of entry around the world, different all over the world, Antarctica, and so it gave me a very, very deep appreciation and understanding for the variety and types of waste that are generated around the world, where they're managed and disposed, how they're managed, where they're traded, and it gave me a deep appreciation for international law, different treaties, how it intersects with our domestic rule of law, because a lot of the stuff was being shipped overseas and transported from developed economies to developing economies, and I saw all of that, and I saw a lot of the impacts that it had on different communities, and so it really was central to and a central takeaway and key to my research that I do today. So anyway, and that's why I'm so adamant on the energy transition and approaching it in a fair and balanced way that really gets to the heart of sustainability. And so this is something that I put together through some data with the UN, and it shows the waste trade flows over 2010 and 2021. And so when we look at the energy transition, we have to look at the full life cycle, and that's from cradle to grave, and ideally transitioning to a circular economy where it's cradle to cradle as much as we can. But when we look at what we're developing and how it's developed and what we're pushing out into the market, and not that I'm opposed to innovation and all of that and commercialization, I strongly believe we need that for a diversified energy future, but we have to understand that things that we are creating, like lithium-ion batteries for the electric vehicles and solar panels and wind turbines. I mean, like, right now, there's no scaled end-of-life pathway for those. They're either exported to developing economies, they're incinerated, or they're landfilled. There's no technology to recycle those. And so what does that mean when we talk about sustainability and our overall sustainability profile? We're not capturing the end of life. We're looking at things from a very, very narrow lens. And I've researched and analyzed hundreds and hundreds of life cycle assessments and sustainability reports, and we're not capturing the things that we need to truly understand what it means for a truly just, inclusive, and sustainable energy transition. And the end of life is often forgotten in these discussions, but it's very, very important for us to going back to the circular economy, where we go back to the design phase, design things so that they can be recycled, design out waste. That's what a circular economy is, and that's going to help with with our waste generation and how we manage waste at the end of the life. And so, just some final thoughts to leave you with. How sustainable is something if we can't manage the waste? If we fail to account for the social impacts across life cycles, is it really sustainable? How sustainable is something if we can't verify what happens to it at the end of the life? And I can tell you that we don't know what happens to things at the end of the life. I've been tracking waste for 27 years, and we don't know. I can go on about some of that. And so if things have to travel over 10,000 miles for processing, treatment, or disposal, which is what we do now. I mean, our material demands for electrification, for all of the metals, materials, rare earth, platinum grade metals that we need for electrolyzers, for batteries, for solar panels. It requires massive amount of materials, mining and processing, which we don't do here in the United States, that are done in economies and countries with very fragile environments that operate in very corrupt regimes. That don't have environment, health, and safety, and labor laws. That's what's happening now, and that's what we're not capturing. And so, with China dominating the supply chain and China dominating the entire processing for our metals that are required for a diversified energy future, how sustainable is that if we know of those impacts across the life cycle? So, happy to take questions during the Q&A.
All right, thank you, Dr. Meidel, for your insight on sustainability, ESG, and your thoughts around life cycle management of hazardous waste. I'm starting to maybe feel a little bit guilty about my Tesla and, wondering what happens after 8 years to my battery, right? So with that, we're going to conclude the presentation part of this evening, but we're going to ask the speakers to please move up to the front to take a few questions.
Those who are not familiar with the CO2 injection is a technology used in oil and gas field that we catch CO2 and inject underground. It's a half-century old technology, but it's getting lots of traction these days because of the reducing carbon perspective. Now, lots of environmental people don't like that because we inject CO2 into the ground to produce more oil and gas, to keep the pressure up. But from your circular economy point of view, that sounds like a perfect solution. What is your view on that?
So I think we have. I think the first step is what is the desired end state for all of us, and if that's sustainability, then it really should be about. It should be about that desired end state, and we should be technology and material agnostic. We're not doing that. We're omitting a lot of different technologies and materials like plastics, which is a critical mineral, from our future, from our diversified energy future, without really understanding all the different impacts that it might have, collecting the metrics that I was talking about. So if sustainability is our desired end state, and we do want a circular economy, then we should be looking at all technologies and all materials, and then capturing the data around that and understanding what those life cycle metrics are. And if it turns out that that there are balanced gains, then we're moving in the right direction. But we shouldn't omit technologies, in my opinion, without fully understanding what those impacts are, and especially if it can lead us to the future that we're after. I do a lot of work in plastics and work with a lot of companies that are trying to incorporate advanced recycling, but it's pretty difficult right now because the society's on an anti-plastics warpath. But we need plastics for everything we need to do in the future, right? They're integral components for solar panels. An electric vehicle is more than 50% hydrocarbons, which are the building blocks of plastics, and we're going to need more plastics to offset the weight of lithium-ion batteries. And so for me, I'm completely technology neutral and materials neutral when I look at things and when I assess things, and it's really about what the data says. And I know that we don't have data for a lot of things, and especially when things move to other markets. There's data scarcity, but we have to be holistic, and the wider the lens that we can look at, and the broader the impacts, and including the social aspects along with the economics and the wider breadth and depth of environmental impacts, the more our decisions can be.
Are you okay with CO2 injection? Generally?
Generally, some of that depends on, and I'm not an expert in that facet of it, and certainly depends on location and geology and all of that. So there's a lot of different factors.
The idea of injecting
it's
CO2 to produce more oil and gas.
Well, and that kind of gets to my point too about the analogy to advanced recycling. It's the same thing, because by pushing plastics to chemical recycling like pyrolysis and gasification, the reason that there's pushback from environmental communities for that is because it incentivizes the production of more plastics, because now we can push those into end markets and recycle those. So it's the same kind of thing, like where the producers don't have an incentive to kind of retract or cut back on the production of that. But really it's an across the board approach, and it depends on the region too. It depends on the region and the geology. And that goes for things like fossil fuels too. It's a cheap and abundant source in a lot of parts of the world, and especially parts of the world that don't have access to technologies and resources to build out things like green hydrogen or solar or wind. And so when we talk about energy transitions, it depends on the lens that you're looking from and where you sit, because there are many parts of the world that are still in energy poverty and are still burning wood and traditional biomass for heat and for food and preparing their meals on unimproved cook stoves. And so by us saying that no, the energy transition is across the board, movement away from fossil fuels is what does that mean for inclusivity and energy equity? It's and pushing costs down on societies that don't have the resources to transition. So when we talk about transition, it's very, very different from the seat that you sit in and the world in which you live.
All right, thank you for that detailed answer. Other questions?
Hello, I'm Didi Budiharjo. While my field is actually in cybersecurity, I'm very passionate about sustainability, to the point where my kids give me, for Christmas, a book on how to manage anxiety over these things that are warming up our Earth so fast. I'm asking from a very humble position, as a regular citizen. I am a proponent of it, implementing it at home, avoiding single use of materials. But when I tried to say that among my colleagues, my peers who claim that they are into sustainability and environment and everything else, the practice is very different, and I get a comment that, well, you won't make any difference. So again, very humble question from a regular citizen. How do we encourage and keep spreading the message? This is about the earth that we live in and for future generations. Thank you.
Does somebody want to take that? It's a tough question, Dee.
I know, they're simple.
So I'll say something. So I'm very hopeful, but I'm also a realist. I think that, this is just, I have no data, right? But this is my future view. We're going to have to do a lot to adapt to the changing climate. I think there are going to be a lot of technologies that will adapt. So it's going to get hotter. It's going to get colder. We're going to get better at, right, those things. I do believe there's a lot that we can do to incentivize, but a lot of that takes, unfortunately, I think people don't change until there's pain, right? So, standing in my house with 3 foot of water was a huge wake-up call, not just for me, but many people. During Harvey, there were oil executives that lost homes. And I think that's when we start to see everyone is impacted by these things. But I also think that we're going to have to look at adaptation mechanisms because it's not going to be enough. I do believe that we are running out of time. I do. I'm not an alarmist, though. I'm hopeful, but at the same time, I also believe that ingenuity is in our DNA. We are humans. We have we've been through tough times, right, where we've reinvented, but we are harming our planet, we are harming ourselves, and we need to be doing more, and we ought to be acting faster.
I'll just add to that, and I totally agree. And they're not easy conversations to have, and it's not easy to understand. Like our recycling rate is globally is 9% for plastics. 9% of plastics are recycled, and here in Houston, the recycling rate is much less. And even those that want to recycle, we don't have the systems and the policies in place for that, and so it becomes very difficult, even when you want to do the right thing. To kind of move the needle on that. But I do see that there is such a shift in generations and a movement from overall society to want to do the right thing and move in a different direction. A society that is more aware, that wants to effectuate change, and a lot of that will be market driven, and a lot of that will be policy driven. We need policies to help us progress with a lot of the change because otherwise it's going to be slow movement. You might have spillover in some areas, consumer behavior changes, but I think it's going to be policy that's going to be the real driver for change. Unfortunately, because policy making is long. In many cases, it can be a very protracted process, but it is something that once we have it in place can be can evolve and can sustain.
Hey, I think I speak for everybody here when I say this is 4 amazing talks. We really appreciate y'all being here tonight. Specifically to Rio, you talked about innovation in Japan, and I think many of us, when we think of Japan, we think of innovation. So it's surprising to hear that you said innovation is not where it needs to be, energy-wise, in Japan. I wonder, the event with the tsunami that happened in 2011 with the nuclear power plant, do you think that made the market say, we got to be more innovative? Did it hinder it? How did that affect innovation in Japan, that cataclysmic event happening?
So in the context of innovation in Japan, the reason why their power of innovation was jeopardized is really a matter of budget from government to academia, university, and also how can I say, collaboration among industry and academia researchers was not really highlighted. Researchers just researching, and the businessmen just doing business. Type of the collaboration was not made. It was kind of silo type of thing. And tsunami, actually, in the context of climate innovation, probably tsunami was impactful because the first idea to decarbonize energy was nuclear, but the option to choose nuclear was gone, and so it's how can I say? It's kind of the challenges was so big in Japan, and it's a resource-less country, not so many, not the big opportunity to entertain renewable energy in Japan, and so people was more keen on some tech thing or some animation or entertainment type of thing. So actually, the energy climate was not really popular topic for the people. Actually, getting less popular by statistics. So, but now the time, and now government is very motivating the people, researchers, the students, companies to collaborate more closely among researchers and companies. So fingers crossed.
And so I'll add to like another lens to that, from looking down the life cycle to the end of life in Japan. And I think from my perspective and from my research, what I've noticed is that in 2018, when China closed its doors and instituted the national sword policy that restricted imports from all other countries of imports of different types of waste and recyclable material. Japan, I mean, that really was a catalyst for innovation at the end of life, right? Because the country, much like the United States too, we were in the same position because we operated off of export models. We exported almost all of our waste to China and to Southeast Asia, and Japan the same thing. And so when China introduced that to the World Trade Organization and then solidified that policy, it really forced countries like Japan and China and Europe to innovate at the end of life and to figure out, how are we going to manage all this waste? How are we going to recycle? How do we build up our own capacity and technologies within our own country to manage it? Because now we can't export it. Now, certainly there were exports that we diverted to Southeast Asia and other countries, but it really spurred innovation in Japan and the U.S. on the end-of-life side.
Yeah, actually, Japanese people is already very sustainable at first hand, and rubbish or trash separation is very common in Japan. When you go to Japan or when you start to live in Japan, first thing you do is to memorize the separation technique of trash. So it's very complicated, to be honest. So and it's different city by city. So. But Japanese people is very good at following the rule. So if regulation is there, we follow. As simple as that. I think it's a mindset or mentality is probably works well.
It's much more ingrained in your culture than it is here.
Oh yeah, culture.
Yeah, and even, I mean, it's like it's very standardized there. And here in the United States, I don't know, how many different municipalities are there in the United States? Like 60,000, I don't know. And they all have their own policies on how to recycle, what to recycle, what not to recycle. Some don't even recycle at all. And so how does an average everyday consumer keep up with that? It changes all the time. I mean, just look at our policies here recycling policies here at Rice are very different than where I live, downtown. And it's very different than other parts of Houston. How do you even sort through all of that madness? And then COVID happened, and then recycling changed even more because then a lot of the municipalities just completely shut down recycling operations and collapsed it all together. And then we weren't able to take certain chemistries of plastics or materials. And it wasn't just here. I mean, it was across the board. And so it fluctuates so much that that consumers can't even keep pace with the changes.
Okay, thank you. I think we have time for maybe one or two more questions.
Hello, I'm a PMBA student here, and I'm interested in talking to Rachel about the last slides you showed about the waste trade. I was curious why the waste trade doesn't happen in Africa and South America, and it was mostly focused on the top.
Yes, that's a great question and an excellent observation. So tracking waste is very difficult because it trades hands multiple times. So most of the exports is to China, and then a lot of our exports out of the United States is also to Mexico. But a lot of the waste is re-exported from China to other countries, like Africa and sub-Saharan Africa and other parts of the country. But trade data is so sparse. And it depends on how it's classified, what system that it's captured in. In the UN Comtrade database, where most of the trade data is not, in my opinion, is not an accurate reflection of what actually happens in reality because there's different systems that aren't integrated, and it depends on what it is that's being traded. And trading waste is difficult because there's no distinction. Well, I shouldn't say there's very few distinctions in that entire database for the entire UN Comtrade database that distinguishes waste from commodities. And so you really have to track by entity and follow it through different exporting patterns in different countries. And when a lot of that enters China, it's almost impossible to really get a true picture of that because the data is hard to come by and they don't release all of it transparently. So it's really you have to paint your own picture, and it's a very difficult puzzle. But to answer your question, a lot of it is re-exported, and it's re-exported multiple times. And so that really shows you mainly like primary, secondary exports.
If I could ask a question, gentleman from PyCon, you mentioned patent sharing. So that's a pretty powerful, questionable move, but powerful on your own point. Could you expand on that? Like, seems like a non-competitive strategy.
So we had patents. We first targeted R32 before 410A. So we coincidentally had a lot of patents around R32 to begin with, but we didn't want to hold on to that technology by ourselves. So we did license to other competitors. And I don't know if I'm answering your question, but with that, in Japan, for example, if you buy Mitsubishi or Hitachi or Toshiba or any company's air conditioning residential, they are already equipped with R32. They're not infringing. They're touching on our patents, but we have made a commitment that we're not going to make an infringement case out of them.
So it's just for R32?
Yes.
And it's for the sake of doing your part to mitigate the risk associated with climate change?
Yeah, we wanted to go first, and also R32 has a benefit. It like Rachel's presentation was very interesting because of the toxic hazardous material. Refrigerants is also a hazardous material, and there are other companies that are coming up with blends, for example, and when it's blended, it's very hard to recover and recycle and reclaim and all that stuff. And whereas R32 is a single component, so we believe not only in the energy performance of it, but we look at it from a life cycle analysis of how much impact does it have throughout the life cycle of an equipment. And R32 being a single component is easier to recover, and it's good from Rachel's point of view of hazardous material treatment as well. And so we granted those patents to other companies so that they could also use it on their behalf. I don't know if that answers your question or not.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good answer, but I guess, like, do you see yourself or your company being in a place where, like, you're firm enough in your commitment to mitigate risk of climate change by, like, releasing not all your patents, but a significant portion of your patents, not just with respect to one component of your business? Right, so if you said HVAC was 30% of emissions, right? If your technology as a company, you've got your inverter technology is an efficient way, do you see your company releasing that patent because it's better for the planet?
So in terms of
And
inverter,
better for business.
Yes, in terms of inverter, I mean, there's always various ways of opening up. So in the case of inverters, as I explained in my presentation, we work with the Chinese government and with the Chinese largest AC company, GREE, to open up our inverter technologies to them so they have access to it. And so it's not always about releasing patents, but there are always various ways how we could work on getting the industry to adopt to certain technologies that would be beneficial for everyone. So, for example, in the U.S., there could be options where we work with the compressor manufacturers, because the big difference, it gets a little technical, but the big difference in the U.S. and Japan is Japanese companies, for HVAC, we make everything pretty much. We feel that the compressors are heart, the refrigerants are blood, so Daikin manufactures refrigerants and compressors. Whereas in the U.S., most companies, they are assemblers, so they buy compressors from Emerson. All our competitors, Carrier, Trane, York, they all buy from compressors from Emerson and all that stuff. So what we can do, for example, is like work with compressor manufacturers and open up our inverter technologies to them, so that they could offer in their product lines to our competitors like Carrier, Trane, and York to adopt inverter technologies. And those are things that's been discussed and considered in the past, and we haven't concluded to that yet. But that is one pathway to go into in terms of energy efficiency. And there's other ways of doing it on heat pumps or various ways in different components that we could open up. But my point being was that we do have those experience in various fields, and we're not trying to just grab the technologies ourselves and trying to gain the market, dominate the market, but we want to grow the market, because HVAC is becoming a very, with the global warming, it's becoming a necessity rather than a luxurious item. Right. And we want to be able to grow it, but be responsible in how we use the energy or the carbon footprint. And we're always thinking of ways of how we could partner up with other companies so that the industry could take a responsible method in achieving these goals, rather than just being one company being selfish and trying to hold on to that technologies or whatever that they have.
Yeah, that's a better answer.